Double the doctor, double the confusion. One wibbly wobbly headache. Hello everybody, welcome back to the channel. My name's Kevin, I am a geek. You are watching Kevin the Geek, and welcome back to my new Doctor Who review. The latest of my series of Doctor Who reviews. This time we are checking out The Rebel Flesh and the Almost People, the two-part story that came from Series 6. Now, of course, in a couple of weeks' time, we are going to be getting the newest series of Doctor Who, and at the time of me recording, what my plan is to do is a weekly reaction to each episode as it comes out. This is, of course, the new series with Ncuti Gatwa, his first full series. It's Series 1/Series 14. You know, it's whichever one you want to refer it as. People are referring to it as different things. So make sure you check it out on the channel. Subscribe if you are indeed new. And that is indeed the plan. So next week, it will be my review of A Good Man Goes to War. And then after that, it will then be time to check out Series 13. So the Doctor Who reviews, they will resume following series, well, the series of reaction. So it will just come out later on this year, which in a way has worked out very well time-wise, because of course there was a mid-season break for this particular series of Doctor Who. So I couldn't have planned that better if I had tried. And believe me, I didn't try. It just happened to fall like that. But yeah, today is an episode, or rather episodes, that I've not watched in a really long time. I mean, a really long time. And Series 6 is weird like that. That pretty much the sort of 5-6 episodes or so that really seem to delve in on the mystery surrounding the Doctor and River and everything in this series, I've watched quite a bit. The other episodes, not really so much so. And so yeah, this episode was a strange one to come into, and it's really strange to come into it, you know, 13 years later after it originally aired.
Great.
There's a lot of stuff that I picked up on this particular watch that I would say I maybe haven't really picked up on before. And that is, a lot of it is really to do with what the gangers in this story represent. And the other thing is, this episode, it provided a big challenge for me with regards to my scoring system. Now, if you are new and you don't know how I do my reviews, then basically I give a scoring system to every review I do of Doctor Who, where you get a score out of 100, which is based on a score out of 10 on 10 different categories. And I use that when I do rankings and other things to help me kind of really structure and work out which episodes are kind of better or not as good as others. But one of those things that I try to put a category on is the villains. And in reality, in this episode, it's such a philosophical episode that it makes you think, who is actually the villain in this?
Look at what you've done. Cleves.
If it's war, then it's war. You don't get it, Doctor. How can you? It's us and them now.
Because the basic idea of this episode is the fact that you have humans against their doppelgangers, the flesh avatars, and it's that sort of question as to whether they are actually humans. Are they actually, duplicates of yourself that happen to share the same memories, or are they capable of living the same life in the way that a human would?
What about me? He's my son too. You really think that? I feel it. Oh, so you were there when he was born, were you? Yeah.
And it does raise questions about what it means to be human and the nature of identity. Just like the duplicates, the gangers in this kind of struggle with their sense of self and individuality. We as humans and humans within this, they will often struggle with their own identities and what makes them truly unique. And so, as an episode, from a philosophical standpoint, it is really good. And I think it was written well by oh god, I can't even remember the guy's name now, and I do apologise for that. But it was indeed actually the guy that wrote the series 2 episode Fear Her, which is not the greatest of episodes. Matthew Graham, sorry, that was his name. I knew I'd remember it. Matthew Graham, he wrote this. But Fear Her, when I did my review to that one, all the way back last year, the thing that struck me was that it wasn't as bad as I remembered. And it's the same with this story as well. I think there are certain aspects of it that I really don't think is good. And special effects, I think, is one of those that, yeah, it really bugs me. We've had it in things like the Lazarus Experiment. That's probably one of those that I would do as my sort of go-to, and I will think back to how Lazarus looked in his kind of scorpion-like form. You had it again here, and this is like 3-4 years later. You'd like to think that they would have got a little bit better, and you've got that whole stupid CGI monster bit right towards the end. You had the bit where Jennifer is in the toilets when, in the first part, when she's not quite sure if she's human or not, and kind of, again, struggling to come to terms with herself, and then her head with this long neck thing, it just comes sweeping through, and it looks terrible.
Just let us live.
I hate to nitpick, but that is the whole purpose. When I do these, I have to nitpick and really get down to the nitty gritty to really try and evaluate which episodes are good or not. But yeah, the CGI in this is really bad, and it's really noticeably bad, and that's what I really don't like. I mean, there are some aspects that don't look too bad, like with the green screen. Like when you see the two doctors on screen together, that doesn't look too bad. But then again, in the first part, when Matt Smith as the doctor is running out in the courtyard thing, and you're in this sort of building, and then you see all the sky behind it. Again, it's very clear that it's green screen, and it, for me personally, it distracts me. It may not distract anybody else.
Rory and Amy, they may not trust both of us.
Are you thinking what I'm thinking?
Inevitably.
See, I'm glad we're on the same
Wavelength, see? Great minds.
Exactly. So, what's the plan?
Save them all, humans and gangers. Tall order, sounds wonderful.
Is that what you were thinking?
Yes, it's just so inspiring to hear me say it.
Doctor, come on!
Now, Matt Smith was fantastic. And one of the things that I loved with this episode and with the writing of it and the dialogue is what they did to emphasize that you don't know who you can trust, and you need to show people's prejudices.
We don't really know anything about them yet.
Well, I know that she's afraid, and she needs our help.
With something as simple as getting the Doctor and his doppelganger to change shoes, because, of course, the original shoes of the Doctor was melted in the acid, it's allowed for Amy's prejudices in this story to really come to fruition. And I liked what they did with Amy and Rory, because it was showing two complete opposites. you had Rory, who was very sympathetic to the plight of the gangers and wanted to help them, whereas Amy was very quickly, like the rest of the humans, very distrusting of the gangers. Which is interesting as well when you go back to it and you think about it after having seen the whole story, knowing that she herself was a ganger at the time. But of course, she was a ganger who didn't know she was a ganger, so that could have some bearing on why, if she had known she was a ganger, would she have interacted with them a bit differently at that point? That would always make an interesting point with that. But like I said, the dynamic between the Doctor and Amy / Amy and the doppelganger, it made for a really fascinating story, and I do remember that the twist really caught me off guard, because I truly did believe, in the same way that Amy did, that the ganger who was posing as the Doctor and vice versa, I genuinely thought that they were as they were. And you had that great little bit in the second part where the Doctor, again, who was posing as his ganger, got really angry towards Amy, which got her scared, and when she went back in the room, she was like, oh no, keep him away from me.
I can feel them as they work each day, knowing the time was coming for them to be thrown away again. Not again, please. And then they are destroyed, and they feel death, and all they can say is why.
I loved that bit. It was so well done. The dynamic, I think, between the three of them, with Amy, Rory, and the Doctor, they are truly some of the highlights of this series. But I am glad, though, that Rory was not killed off in this episode. And it could have been so easy to actually have made a duplicate of Rory to get him killed again, as has been the kind of recurring theme for such a long period of time over the last couple of episodes, which, if you didn't see my review last week of The Doctor's Wife, check that out, because I do vent my frustrations of that. But yeah, it would have been very easy, I think, to do that Rory fake out death thing again. So I'm glad that they didn't. But kind of going back to the gangers themselves, like I said, it is a very metaphorical and analytical and sort of philosophical debate around the idea of the gangers. And I remember from, I think it was the Big Bang Theory, if I remember correctly, I think Sheldon, it was one of those kind of off-the-cuff joke things, but it's something that came back to my mind in this episode. It's when Sheldon was talking about teleportation.
You would not have actually transported the individual. You would have destroyed him in one location and recreated him in another.
How about that?
Personally, I would never use a transporter, because the original Sheldon would have to be disintegrated in order to create a new Sheldon.
So the idea that, in theory, teleportation, in theory, is that, me, if I was to teleport and I was go to my next town, for example, through this teleport, in Sheldon's eyes, me, I would be dead. But then the Kevin that would materialize is not me. It would be a reconstruction of me, but it would be someone who has the same thoughts, the same memories, the same ideas. And it's an interesting thought process. And that's what I really like with this story. There's a few things I think it can be a bit of a representation of. It could be a representation towards the exploitation of labour and the class struggles, because obviously the gangers are basically created in order to allow the humans to do their jobs without putting the humans themselves at risk. But, it sort of will parallel, I think, the real world issues of class struggles and exploitation, where you can get certain groups who are marginalized and exploited for the benefits of other people, and some people could view that, for example, people in third world countries who work in horrible sweatshops creating stuff for people in Western culture. You could see it as a sort of a metaphor for that. You could talk about the ethical conundrum surrounding cloning in general, because obviously years ago you had that sheep, wasn't it? There was a sheep who was cloned. Was it Dolly the sheep, if I remember correctly? Something like that. I think we're talking like mid-2000s, aren't we? And there was always that rage around, is it real? Is it not real? Can you clone somebody who, maybe like if you had a child, for example, and cloning technology exists, could you take some of the DNA of that child who, was a miscarriage, or, maybe they died, it was a stillbirth, for example. Could you take some of that DNA and reclone them to, recreate that same child in order to make them kind of alive again? But in doing so, is it the original child? There's a lot of philosophical debates we can have around this, even to the point, of talking, about the dangers of technology, because this is a dangerous or a potentially dangerous technology you have in this story. And I think the other thing that I was thinking that it can be a bit of a metaphor for is around the idea of race, and also I think gender identity, which, race is obviously, and racial prejudices have been around for a long time, and that, I think, there is a lot of stuff that kind of shone through in this one. It can definitely be that metaphor that you are mistrusting of other people based on where they've kind of come from, and the kind of exploration around gender identity. I think that's a big one that you could take away from this one. The idea that you're not quite sure who you are. You have an idea of who you are, but you're struggling to get other people to accept you for who you are. I think there's a lot of things that people could really take inspiration from this story of. But I think overall, it wasn't a bad story. I think it was generally a pretty good story. But there were some things that didn't land well. I mean, like the supporting cast, they weren't great. They weren't truly engaging. I mean, I'd say really the only one who I would probably say I even recognise was Mark Bonner, who appeared in the second series of Line of Duty, which I reacted to and watched on the channel earlier this year. The third season of Line of Duty will be coming up very, very soon, so stay tuned for that. Yeah, most of it, I did find them a bit weak and bland, and like I said, the CGI was pretty rad as well. But I think I'm going to round up that review now. So, like I said, every Doctor Who review gets a score out of 100, and I use that to give it a grading. So, let's check out the scores for the Rebel Flesh and the Almost People. And so, this two-parter story has scored 71 points out of 100, which makes it a B- story. It was pretty good, don't get me wrong, and it is something that I would like to check out more in the future. But speaking of the future, like I said, next week will be A Good Man Goes to War. Then the week after that we're going to be back to doing some Doctor Who reactions as I check out the newest series. And it's in theory going to be one a week, but then I do go on holiday midway through the airing of these of this series. So there may be a couple of weeks where you will have to just wait for me to come back off holiday. I will be abroad. I'm not going to be doing anything. There'll be no videos whilst I'm away because I'll be taking a little break to, you know, really earn a bit of a rest after doing daily videos and often multiple uploads on a single day for, you know, well over a year now. So thank you so very much for joining me once again. For now, my name is Kevin. I am a geek, and you've been watching Kevin the Geek.